Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Zimbabwe Daily. My name is Yvonne, and this is Frank Talk, a program that we bring you to clearly lay out the issues affecting our society. And today we bring you student and political activism in Zimbabwe. What is student activism, and how do we interlink student activism with political activism? Why is it that somehow our student activists are forced to align with a certain political movement? We have the ZINASU leaning more towards the movement for democratic change. We also have the ZICOSU leaning more towards ZANU-PF. So we have invited our young leaders into the studio so that we may dissect this topic to understand what the students are saying student activism is vis-a-vis political activism. Because of our COVID-19 and stuff, we're trying to minimize movement to the studio. So we have people joining us online. Right now, I'll allow the guests that are in the studio to introduce themselves so that we can begin this process moving. We're still waiting for one of our ZICOSU affiliate, former national spokesperson, to join us so that our panel is a little bit balanced. We're also expecting another person to join us, say Takudzwa, who is coming in from elite leadership, and just for him to give us an understanding of what leadership is when it comes to activism. All right, so welcome, Liam. Kindly introduce yourself to the people who are watching us live.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Greetings to the masses of Zimbabwe. I answer to the name Liam Takura Kaninga, and I'm also known as Umkokeli Wabantu, means leader of the people. And I'm really glad to be
here. Excellent. Thank you so much, Liam. Welcome, Odia.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Good afternoon, everyone who is watching live now. My name is Odia Ndalega, ZINASU Masvingo Provincial Chairperson. Thanks to host me, Yvonne. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me. You're both coming in from ZINASU. So I would ask you this question. I'll ask you this question so that we kickstart the conversation. Tanaka Sakadzo tells me that he's trying to log in. As soon as he does, we'll be able to see him. So he should be able to join us in this conversation. What is student activism, Liam? What do you understand when we say student activism?
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. Well, the first thing we have to understand student activism from two levels of analysis. Firstly, we have to identify the stakeholder, and that is the student. Who is a student? Anyone who is enrolled to pursue studies at an educational institution. That is a student. Then activism is the act or practice of participating in certain discourses or in certain discussions to advance a certain cause or an idea. And it's usually influenced by a certain ideology as well as a certain identity that someone draws in. For example, student activism itself, like I told you, it's the idea or the act of students participating in certain conversations and discourses to advance an idea. And it's influenced by an ideology or a certain identity. And in the lines of ZINASU ourselves, we fight for academic freedom, and we are inspired by the socialist ideology. So we advance student rights, human rights, as well as basically at its most primary level, which is academic freedom. So the aspect of us participating in the conversation of Zimbabwe in the conversation of Zimbabwean governance through advancing the agenda for academic freedom in all institutions of learning in Zimbabwe is what primarily becomes student activism. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Liam, there with an elaborate explanation of what you understanding to be student activism. Now I'll come. All right, so we lost Dia there. She just went offline, but all the same, the conversation has to continue. And when we are looking
Yes.
at the kind of activism that we have, especially in Zimbabwe, somehow there are labels that have been placed on you as students. And if you are an affiliate
Yes.
of ZINASU, we get to see more of you in prisons. You know, I remember Takuz
Yes.
Gangadzori is still on bail, following up on issues.
Yes.
Now, when we talk student activism and political activism, how is it that our students are somehow politically attached? I'll come to Odelia first. Odelia, maybe you can give us an understanding what you understand to be student activism from your own perspective.
All right. Thank you so much, Yvonne. On my own understanding, student activism is the cause by the students politically for a change, either environmentally or politically, especially for a specific institution. Thank you.
Right. And when we look at our politics in Zimbabwe, our national politics, somehow we are seeing more of young people getting arrested on political grounds, inciting public violence. We have seen the attacks that have taken place with Chakutwa Ngadzori, who is your president in ZINASU. Now, when you look at that divide, politics and student activism, where do they meet?
All right.
Okay, Odia, please go ahead.
Okay, I think we cannot separate student activism and national politics. For before we became students, we are citizens of Zimbabwe, and issues which affect us as students usually they are part of the issues which affect us as the nation. So we end up being attached to national politics. That's what I think.
Okay. Thank you. Well, one thing that we can't really pretend that it doesn't exist, Yvonne, is the dialectical relationship between students and the national question, or students and the greater masses of Zimbabwe. Because something you should understand is, like what Odia said, before being students, we were citizens, right? And we are all affected by like certain environmental or spherical issues that happen to be very manifest in Zimbabwe. For example, the economic question. Whenever the economy is bad, right, it equally means that it's going to affect the students, because that means commodities are going to go high, fees is going to go high, and whenever there is bad governance in the political sector through the issues of state capture, dictatorship, it means that it even speaks to the basic human rights of the students, right? So in that broader question, it means that as students, collectively out of our affiliations, like for example, in ZINASU, we ought to speak truth to those things as factors that are impeding us from enjoying our right to education. And equal again, we have to understand how the administrative structures that interlink students, student activism, and national politics. For example, in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe is a unitary democracy, and it happens that the president of the republic himself is the chancellor of all state-owned institutions, or of all state institutions. That includes all universities. And the state actually owns more institutions of higher learning than the private sector. So in the end, it means that whenever we want to address our problems, you understand that before, like after there is an administration, there is the president, who also happens to be the head of government. And him being the head of government is responsible for reforming the nation's laws, for reforming the nation's governance systems in a way that enables, or that provides an enabling environment for students to actually learn and to actually pursue their knowledge without any unnecessary public pressure. And it is even a right under Chapter 4 of the Constitution that we have the right to academic freedom. So in the end, we have to approach it at a broader and national level. And that means engaging policymakers, engaging national decision makers, and the chancellor himself. And that even means to hold him accountable, right? And this is where now we get to be involved in national politics. It's us answering the national question. And for example, right now, due to the inflation, due to the hyperinflation in Zimbabwe today, it has forced universities to review their figures up and index them against the US dollar. And the value of the US dollar is going up. And we all know that what has caused the inflation is corruption, it's illicit financial outflows, illicit political financing, there is state capture, there is looting. There is even records on TV that the former Minister of Health, Obadiah Moyo, was even dismissed from his office because of looting COVID-19 funds. And even there are still cases of Zimbabwe losing 3 billion, an equivalent of $3 billion US dollars to illicit cross-border dealing. And these things affect the economy and they lead to inflation and many other economic woes that therefore lead to a tuition hike in institutions. And that itself gives us the mandate as student leaders and student activists to hold the chancellor accountable as the head of government that, look, your people are messing up our future. They are threatening our future as learners, and they are killing the economy such that it is putting us to a state where we are failing to access education. Because in 2020 alone, Midland State University actually experienced a total of about 400 students deferring because of tuition fee hikes. It was even on record. I presented the same thing on Parliament. And that itself gives us a mandate now to call the government to order, because at the end of the day, the right to education does not exist in isolation. It does not exist in situ. It's not an isolated case. It has many interlinked factors that are profound and manifest in the political space of Zimbabwe. And learning from in a public institution, understanding that education itself is a right that the government has the duty and mandate to deliver to students, we ought to always answer the national question. And that's where the nexus between student activism and political activism comes in. But however, there is a difference now when it comes to student activism and political activism, despite the major similarities. Political activism in most cases is usually linked to partisan politics, right? For example, the Movement for Democratic Change, they have their youth assembly, and the youth assembly does much of the part in order to advance youth issues through partisan spheres. And then ZINASU, as apolitical as we are, we use our own means. For example, use civic collection, we use student engagement, we even do it in our own capacity. So we are not necessarily affiliates of political parties, but we use the union approach. And student activism usually, in most cases, is influenced by the leading of unions. Even the Zimbabwe Congress of Students Union, regardless of the fact that they chose to be an affiliate organization of the Zimbabwe African Union Patriotic Front, ZANU-PF. And you could see that even the MDC has its own outfit of student activists, but they take a partisan approach to it, and that is the MDC Students Council, right? So now, what limits it is the idea of us being centered on advancing first and foremost the right to academic freedom, or pushing forward the agenda for academic freedom. And in most cases, tackling the national question is a methodology towards achieving that. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam, for that. Now, I want to welcome Tanaka Sakazo. Welcome, Tanaka. You sparked this conversation when you say that there is an overlap that is taking place in student activism and national politics or political activism. So welcome, and please unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us what you think about student and political activism in Zimbabwe.
Okay, thank you. Revolutionary greetings, fellow comrades and friends, the citizens of Zimbabwe at large, and students and student activists and political activists in the various parts of our country, Zimbabwe. I'm glad to be here live on Zim Daily Facebook page, and thanks So much thanks to the Zim Daily Media Group for hosting us. Special mention to Yvonne Chaka, who is our moderator today. My name is Tanaka Sakazo, and I am a ZICOSU affiliate, a student at Middle State University, and I'm a former Secretary for Internal and External Affairs, ZICOSU MSU chapter, and I'm also a former Secretary for Information and Publicity, again in the ZICOSU MSU chapter. I'm also pleased to announce that I also worked with Comrade Liam when he was in his term of office as the Vice President of Middle State University. I was one of those people working in his office as the interim committee. So that's what I can say about myself.
Right, and just give us an update of what you think student activism vis-a-vis political activism is from your perspective.
All right, I cannot give a singular definition for student activism, neither can I give a singular definition for political activism. But let me say the idea, or let me say the reason why political activists or student activists indulge in student activism or political activism remains the same, which is the idea to bring about change. The essence of political activism or student activism is about bringing change, be it economic, be it religious, be it social, be it political. The essence remains the same. So the only difference I want to note between student activism and political activism is the setting in which the two are most prevalent. Student activism being most prevalent in learning institutions and political activism being prevalent in the political field. Now, the challenges of the two are almost, if not all, the same. In tertiary institutions where student activism is prevalent, you will find students indulging in the status quo for various reasons, but the actual reason why students indulge in student activism is all right. Let me say the reason why students should be involved in student activism should be centered around the idea of creating a conducive environment for learning to all students, regardless of political affiliation. Though we may know that these student unions are somehow linked to political parties, we might deny the fact that we might want to argue that no, ZICOSU is sort of like an affiliate, but it's apolitical. I don't subscribe to that notion. In as much as political facts are to be represented, well, ZICOSU is affiliated to ZANU-PF, and it's linked to ZANU-PF. And what I can say is that its way of operating is somehow governed by the ZANU-PF political party. And I do not know much about ZINASU, but I can also say that somehow it's linked to MDC, the MDC political party. So we have seen the formations of different student unions, which I believe the driving force was one, or if not one, let me say it was supposed to be one. Students' union should be performing one role of representing students in learning related issues.
Right.
However, students' unions.
You're saying something quite interesting, and that ZICOSU is affiliated to ZANU-PF and ZINASU is affiliated to MDC somehow. Now, my question is, are those affiliations somehow affecting the ways that as students you want to get your issues put across in the different spheres? Are these affiliations not impacting your ability to actually challenge existing bad practices? Like, is ZINASU going to stand up and say, like what Liam earlier on said, that fees are going up, and yet the services are not really at the levels of the amounts that they are charging for, or they are charging in USD equivalent to the RTGS value, and yet the parents on the other hand are not earning as much. Now, how will students, if you are affiliated, for example, to ZANU-PF, and the ZANU-PF side of government is the one that is at the helm of things, are the students from ZICOSU able to challenge that? Or somehow you've been assimilated into the systems and you now bow to whatever ideology those parties are pursuing?
All right. Thank you for that question. I was about to get into what you asked about. So, as we saw the formations of student unions in Zimbabwe, ZICOSU and ZINASU being the most, let me say, the most actors in the student activism. Their affiliations to these political parties have really affected how student activism should be, and they've affected the representation of students in various tertiary institutions. These unions seem to be operating basing on political motives that has aroused, which is now causing student activism together with student activists to be toothless dogs. These unions were created with support from political parties, but now the problem is that they are focusing on political differences, and I can say it has turned to be a game of adversaries. It has now turned to be a game of adversary between ZICOSU and ZINASU. These unions are now in a battle to try to prove which one is the most powerful one. And it will be a misrepresentation of political facts to not regard ZICOSU as to have proven to be the stronger union, taking into consideration that they are linked to the ruling party, and the ruling party controls everything in Zim. So these unions can never support each other when it comes to fight for good causes. You find maybe like Honorable Liam was saying, he was talking about the increment of fees, and we have seen the ZINASU guys writing petitions and going with their petitions and their requests to the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, and they've gone to relevant offices, right? It's okay. And we've also seen the ZICOSU guys also doing the same. But the problem now is that the ZINASU guys are working alone as a student union, right? And the ZICOSU guys are now working alone as a student union also. They don't want to come together to fight for one cause. These unions are fighting for one thing. They want the decrement of university fees. But because of those political differences, me being a supporter of ZANU-PF and Liam being a supporter of MDC, we can never come together and say, no, we need to do this, we need to strategize, and we need to work hand in hand in order for us to achieve this. And the most saddening part is that I don't want only to mention about the increment or the decrement of fees. These unions, when they lob for changing these tertiary institutions, change is supposed to be a portion to a certain group of people who would have advocated for that change. Let me say maybe the ZICOSU the ZICOSU guys have been writing petitions so that maybe at MSU, students should be allowed to write examinations without finishing the required amount of fees for them to sit for their examinations. When they do so,
I'm going to come in there, Tanaka. I'm going to come in there and ask Odia, do you think, as student leaders, as ZINASU and ZICOSU at is it Great Zimbabwe University in Masvingo, do you think you can actually come together in agreement over an issue that is affecting students? If not, why can't you?
All right, thank you, Yvonne. I think it's so hard for us to come together, ZINASU and ZICOSU to work together, especially at Great Zimbabwe University, only because the ZICOSU guys, they think they are more superior than us, and they think if we act in such a way, maybe challenging what the government have said, especially on issues affecting students, they think we are creating the dark space for them, for they are affiliates of the government, of the ruling government. So they will never be part of us, especially on issues affecting students, especially when we need to be in the streets fighting for student rights. So it's so hard for us to work together. So I don't think it will work in a sense kuti ZINASU because will come aligned and have the same issue, even if we are working together in issues that affecting students.
Right. So even if you have similar issues and even if you're affected by the same issue, it's difficult for you guys to come together. Liam, why is it difficult for ZINASU to work with ZICOSU on common issues affecting the students?
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. I will respond to that question on 3 levels of analysis. And firstly, it's the issue of political identities and affiliations. I'm sure Tanaka has exhaustively spoke about the issue of the historicity of how each union seeks to be implicitly or explicitly affiliated or aligned to a certain party. Then secondly, we're going to talk about issues to do with ideological clashes or ideological differences. Then thirdly, we're going to look at the general perception, right? So now, to get into the first part, when it comes to issues to do with affiliations and issues to do with political identities, let's look at how ZICOSU itself is an appendage of the ZANU-PF Youth League. That's an undeniable fact, right? And by it being an appendage of the ZANU-PF Youth League, knowing the internal politics of ZANU-PF, ZANU-PF is a centricist party where it has a strong whip system that forces you to toe the line. And at some point, it limits their voice to speak the truth to power or to speak the truth to the chancellor of all universities, who happens to be the first secretary of their political party. And in most cases, out of that political learning they have, they seek to stand in solidarity more with the government. And based on their narratives or based on their defense or based on what they say, they believe that they can dialogue. They say that ZINASU is too radical, so they can dialogue more with the government more, especially in terms of them being closer to the center of power. So they have a viable issue, right? So sometimes they distance themselves from our approaches to politics, and it is always influenced by the political identities or the affiliation discourse. And then secondly, we will also talk about the issue of ideological clashes, right? For example, ZINASU, I told you we are socialists and we are far left in our approaches. So in most cases, we believe that yes, we can dialogue, we can debate, but if these two fail, we demonstrate. Why should we demonstrate? Because we have to show the urgency of a problem. And whenever we demonstrate, it's always that we are questioning or holding ZANU-PF accountable. And it affects the comfort of ZICOSU to join in. ZICOSU, by virtue of their affiliatory obligations, they defend ZANU-PF or they defend the government, since ZANU-PF occupies the government right now. So they tend to defend. And then within defending, it has a trickle-down effect of spreading apathy and polarization among students, because, you know, lines get drawn in the sand such that the students become divided. And in the end, what it does is it impairs or it impedes to bring about the change that Tanaka was so talking about. And then the third thing is on issues to do with, like I told you, as I said before, the general perception, right, around it. And these general perceptions, they don't just come about on their own. Like they're not just natural, they are artificial, they are created by certain people in power. For example, if you understand the history of ZINASU, ZINASU, when it was formed, it was the first organization to challenge Robert Mugabe's one-party state. And ZINASU, yes, was there at the founding stages of the movement for democratic change. We deployed some of the pioneering leaders or the founding leaders of the first inaugural Congress of the movement for democratic change. So now, by virtue of us being an ally, right, not an affiliate, but an ally of the movement for democratic change, the ruling ZANU-PF therefore brands us as a regime change agents, right? They then criminalize our existence, they criminalize our activities, and therein they support what the Zimbabwe Congress of Students Union, ZICOSU, does, because ZICOSU is aligned to them more. And ZICOSU would never bite the hand that feeds them. And by them being closer to ZANU-PF, they take an approach which is more romanticized, which is more moderate, and that is by their choosing. And this peddles up a perception that, you know what, whenever you deal with ZANU-PF, they are always out to repress us, they're always out to destroy us. And that itself subdivides, it causes a lot of discord and a lot of boycott between ZICOSU and ZINASU, and that's what impedes us from working together. But that doesn't make it impossible for us to work with ZICOSU. That doesn't. Because in the end, what we want is to save the greater interests of the generality of the students in Zimbabwe and the generality of the masses in Zimbabwe. For example, sometime last year, around May, Takudzwa Ngadzore, the ZINASU president, and PG West Namburu, approached the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science, Technology and Innovation jointly in order to negotiate issues to do with tuition fees hikes, right? And for the first time, we saw the two parallel unions working together towards a common cause. It's something that no one would want to talk about. And that itself showed the possibility of ZICOSU and ZINASU working together. Then the second thing also again is at campus level, towards the pursuit of fees must fall. I worked with other comrades who were in SRCs at that time in different universities, and that included those that were even elected under a ZICOSU ticket, to engage Amon Morira, who is the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, in terms of lobbying for the downward review of tuition fees. And we had the students in Daba at the Masasa Training Bureau in Harare, and we saw no political color. And for the first time again, in fact, that was for the second time again, seeing students thinking beyond differences or political differences or affiliations, but putting together the cause to fight for the right to education. So it's not impossible, but there are hindrances to that, to the fruition of that possibility. You understand? And it's a multifaceted issue. It has a lot of issues surrounding it. And for example, the demonization of ZINASU and its glorification by ZANU-PF. So that itself creates some love-hate relationships between the two. But otherwise, it's not impossible for ZINASU and ZICOSU to work together. And it only has to be done when we respect that people would never be the same. People would never have the same approaches. People would never have the same methodologies. And it has to be on the basis of tolerance and sober engagement. You understand? We don't need to force people to be ZINASU, or to force people to be ZICOSU, or to even force people to say ZANU-PF is right for us to come and fight for a common cause, even if you feel you support ZANU-PF, because it is your right to freedom of association even, and it is my right not to associate. But when it comes to fighting for a common cause, nothing should stop us from working together. And that's something I would say. It's not impossible for ZINASU and ZICOSU to fight for academic freedom and the right to education or a democratic Zimbabwe together, but there are hindrances, and hindrances are based on the three levels of analysis that I've spoken to.
Right. So we are talking political affiliation, ideology, and general perception that has been created because of the history and the background that both of you, all of you has given. So now we want to move forward to then say, what should we do as young people? What should we do as students in order for our issues to be heard at the national level vis-a-vis the challenges that you have been highlighting? I know, Tanaka, you've spoken of the need for that convergence to take place so that so that students are able to stand on their issues as students and represent them to the governing authorities for the solving of students' issues. However, like what Liam has highlighted, the issue of being appendages of these political movements, the ideology that both of you are pursuing of the far left and the far right, where is the middle? We have the general perception where that is being created by the people in power. You vilify one union, you praise the other union, and at the same time creating an aloofness in young people to not want to participate. And those who dare participate become the prone, thrown in jail here and there, beaten up here and there. Now, what should we do going forward in order to sanitize our student activism? We know there are a lot of young people out there who would love to be part of the growing numbers of activists, but because of the arrest, the violence that is associated with activism in general, not so many people would want to get into the fray. Now, what do we do in order to make sure that our student activism is not diluted within the political discourse of things happening? I'll start with you, Tanaka.
All right. Thank you for that question, Yvonne. Let me say it's not going to be easy for us to bring sanity in student activism. Neither is it going to be easy for us to bring sanity in political activism. But what I think needs to be done in tertiary institutions or even in political activism is for the youth to put aside political differences and exercise madness. The former president of Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara, once said, "You can never get to see fundamental revolution, or you can never get to see test the results of fundamental revolution unless you exercise a certain amount of madness." Now, madness, I can define it politically as doing that which you know that the majority is against, or the majority says it's insanity, and that is to stand for someone who affiliates differently politically when it comes to fights for good cause. I cannot with sense and with holding the essence of student activism or political activism, rejoice in the suffering of a fellow ZINASU cadre simply because we affiliate differently in terms of politics. So I think we have to groom a generation of students, a generation of political activists, which can be able to put aside political differences when it comes to fights for good cause. We understand that, like what Liam was saying, our ideologies we believe in are different. And I want to tell you that in ZICOSU, those guys, they don't believe in demonstrations. Though demonstrating is a right which is stipulated in our constitution, but find that they can never get to support the ZINASU union when it comes to demonstrating, because they know that it's obvious when they demonstrate they're going to face incarceration, they're going to be imprisoned. But somehow the imprisonment is not necessary. I don't mean to be rebellious or what, but truly speaking, what we need to do is to have a generation of students, a generation of student activists, a generation of political activists, which can put aside political differences. And if we cannot do that, trust me, especially in ZICOSU, things are going to change. I'm telling you this. Because the situation, like what the general once said, during November 2018, he said it has reached another stage. And truly speaking, it has reached another stage. And I'm telling you, fundamental revolution is going to be seen. And student activism and political activism. That's what I can say.
Right. Thank you so much, Tanaka. Now over to you. Odi, you raised some very critical issues, Tanaka, which may be very difficult for some to really swallow. You know, put aside political differences and pursue the number one cause. That is another issue. Really, our politics in our country has been so toxic to a point that you cannot comment on things that are happening in your country without being placed, whether you are on the far left or on the far right. A wrong is not taken as a wrong, but it is taken as rebellion, like what my panelist has said. Oh dear, what should we do? How do we proceed in order to make sure that our student activism is not diluted, neither is it polluted by the politics prevailing in our country?
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. I think I have to add on what Tanaka have said earlier. Though it is hard for us to leave our political, or to not look about our political differences, it's so hard for us to work together, as I said earlier. But I think we have to forget about us being affiliates of either ZINASU or ZICOSU, and work on student issues first, especially on national level, before it become national level. For as Tanaka said, it's hard for them to participate in demonstrations. Us as ZINASU, we believe in dialogue, as Liam have said before. But if we can see that the government or those who are in authority are relaxed and they are not even taking consideration of our dialogues, we then became resilient and resistant, and walk to the streets so that we can fight for the students. For as Tanaka said, that it's hard for them to walk on the streets or to demonstrate. That only shows that we cannot even work together as students, because being in the streets is another stage, or it's another level of showing the government that we are serious on the issues we want the government to address. So when the cost comrades are not willing or ready to demonstrate, then there is no way we can work together.
Right, oh dear. You say as long as they don't want to demonstrate, and as long as they're not willing to demonstrate, when your issues as young people and as students are not being heard, then there is no chance at all for you guys to work together. All right, so I'll come to you, Liam. Liam, what is your own perception around student activism and politics and how they interlink, and what is the way forward? How do we proceed from here if we are to see students' issues being dealt with? Liam. Liam, I think you muted your microphone. Can you please unmute yourself?
Okay.
There you go.
I just did. Okay, thank you, Yvonne. Firstly, like we said, the interlink between student activism and political activism is the pursuit of the national question or the response to the national question, as well as addressing national issues to bring about change. And change, best understood, is proper service delivery, respect for human rights, respect for rule of law, legal reform, legal and constitutional reforms, social justice, gender equality, racial justice, etc. Right? And all these things have what we call, like I told you before, there is a dialectical relationship between the students and the general mass. You understand. For example, the relationship between the students and labor is particularly by the fact that the students themselves are workers in transit. That's why, like, we are all learning to pursue a profession. So somewhere, somehow, our struggles correlate, and we have to stand in solidarity with all the other masses, with the workers, with the informal traders, with the mothers. We have to stand in solidarity with the old people, because in the end, we don't exist in a vacuum or in isolation. So that's the first response to what is the link between student activism and political activism. And then secondly, yes, there are associated challenges of repression, the associated challenges of demonization and vilification by those in power. And like I said before, there are also issues to do with perceptions, or rather misperceptions. But now, one thing we also have to look at in terms of how best can we work together, or what is really stopping us from work together, I think it has been overly discussed, is firstly, we have to look at the fact that, like I said, we are all citizens of Zimbabwe, and no one is a certain space of special privilege that makes them immune to the problems that we face, especially as students. We all face the same problems. We are all affected by the same problems. When it comes to militarization of campuses, we are all repressed. Yes, those that side with the repressor or the oppressor at that time might seem exempted, but in the end, it shows that they also can't cross over. Like what Tanaka said, these people, the ZICOSU comrades can't demonstrate because they fear repression. They fear the incarceration we face. They fear going through what Takudwa went through. So that's a harvest of fear. So the day that we get to understand that, what, these problems affect all of us, no one is immune, it will definitely give us an urgent need to come together. And I'm glad that Tanaka saw that, has seen that urgent need, that there is need to come together. And now the way forward starts by coming back to demystify certain barriers. And that is, firstly, one, we need, like at a general level, we need, one, to demystify what it means to be ZICOSU and what it means to be ZINASU. And secondly, we need to understand that even if people accuse us of being aligned to certain political parties, it is not new to the world. Even in South Africa, I told you, like, there is SASCO, South African Students Congress, which is openly and directly an appendage of the ANC Youth League. And then we have Democratic Association of Students, or Democratic Alliance Students Organization, DASO, which is openly an appendage of the Democratic Alliance in South Africa. We have the EFF Students Command, which is an appendage of the Economic Freedom Fighters in South Africa. We even had Azania Students Organization before South Africa's independence. So it is not new that students or student organizations are affiliated to political parties or aligned to certain political parties. That is the first narrative we need to dismiss, and that is the first misperception we need to dismantle. That there is nothing wrong with affiliating with certain political ideologies, because when ideologies agree, there is a bound of solidarity, and that solidarity is inevitable. So let's not criminalize students affiliating with whichsoever political party they want. Then secondly, when we look at actor analysis, starting with university administrations need to take a level and sober approach in terms of how they engage with each of the students' unions. For example, the ordinances are used to repress ZINASU, because ZINASU, it is that which questions their employer who happens to be the ruling government of Zimbabwe, right? But then they need to understand that ZINASU itself as an organization, even YAD, or even any other student-led organization, is or should be registered under the Zimbabwe Youth Council Act, which makes them a jurisperson that can sue or be sued with legal identity. So in the end, you cannot deny us action on campus. You cannot deny us the right to even assemble, because even in the Constitution, we have the right to freedom of assembly and the right to freedom of association. And those are the things that the university administrations at their level need to accept and admit to, as the first step towards making sure that student activism has no hindrances in terms of advancing their causes, and so that we also break down the barriers that might stop us from working together. Then secondly, we need to move on to respecting the Constitution, decriminalizing certain organizations that speak dissent or that are anti-establishment should be done off with. It is high time that we decriminalize anti-establishment student organizations and make sure that we allow everyone their space, reopen the democratic space such that everyone gets to contribute and participate. And when it comes to working together, it should be understood that it's not only demonstrating together that we mean by working together. Even when it comes to dialogues and engaging, or even organizing spaces for discourse, organizing meetings, approaching decision makers, and even writing letters or even petitions, it should not be, that there should not be polarity in those approaches. We can even work together on those essences, and to also make concessions clear and admittable when one is right. For example, when you say fees must fall, it is ZICOSU's moral obligation, if they are serious about working together, to agree that yes, ZINASU is right, fees must surely fall. And when ZICOSU called out Robert Mugabe for his authoritarianism, but nothing has changed so far with Emerson Mnangagwa even, we said they were right, Mugabe had to go, right? So the same concessions we made to them is the same concessions that they have to make with us. When we say sexual harassment on campus should be dealt with, or when we take a certain lecturer, no matter what their affiliation is, to court for sexual harassment, ZICOSU should also side with that, because in the end, as students, we ought to stand in solidarity with each other, regardless of, yes, what Tanaka said, our political affiliations, political leanings. We can't impose political correctness on certain people. And also, again, as students, we need to also acknowledge the fact that political correctness in a democracy or in a revolution should never exist. There is no way we can ever try and dilly-dally with the people that we know are perversing or impeding our right to access education or our right to academic freedom, or people that are threatening our future. We should always be ready to speak truth to power. Just like what Takudzo Ngadzore did last month, when he said, like his tweet when he called out the opposition leader Nelson Chamisa for not appearing at Makombora Ruzivish's trial. That kind of independence itself, yes, should be seen across the board. Even ZICOSU should be able to tell Emerson Mnangagwa that for as long as you're not dealing with corruption, you can't expect us to keep on supporting you. And I even encourage student leaders and student activists from Zimbabwe to take a leaf from what happens in other countries. It would help our activism to grow and mature. If you've seen SASCO comrades in South Africa, they told the ANC that until they address the fees issue, right, they were not going to campaign for ANC in the local government elections that are coming soon. And at a certain time, during fees must fall in South Africa and roads must fall in South Africa, DASHO, SASCO, EFF Students Command, and many other student-led organizations came together to say, you know what, fees must fall, and education should not be treated like a privilege, but a right in South Africa. And that's the same thing we need to do in Zimbabwe. We need to come to a certain time where we make certain concessions and agree on a certain common cause and fight together without having to force people to be like us, or without having to force people to take our approaches. You understand? So that is what is to be done. And I think, like I said before, that is the link between student activism and political activism.
Excellent. Thank you, Liam, for being so elaborate. And I think it is very clear what needs to be done, and it is very clear what we need to do in order for our student activism to be viable in Zimbabwe. I always say that we do our politics badly in Zimbabwe, and it has a net effect on everything else that we will be trying to work on. So hopefully this conversation has jacked some people to consider what we are doing to ourselves as a nation, what we are doing to ourselves as students, and the disservice that we are doing to our agenda as a nation. Do we have a common goal? Is it that we don't have the same needs, or is it that we are too ashamed to tell truth to power. That was the conversation we were having right here on Zimbabwe Daily with my guest, Tanaka Sakadzo. He is a former spokesperson at Midlands State University, ZICOSU affiliate. We had Liam Kanenga of ZINASU affiliate, as well as Odia Rusenga. She is the chairperson at the Great Zimbabwe University. Thank you so much, lady and gents, for joining me on this conversation. And thank you to all of you who've been following us live and those of you who are going to watch later on. Let us keep the conversation going. Where do we put the divide between student and political activism? Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. May just say bye-bye to the people who have been watching.
Okay. Thank you very much, Yvonne. Thank you for having us, and I'm greatly grateful to the masses of Zimbabwe and the rest of the other student comrades across the teapot-shaped land north and south of the Limpopo and the Zambezi for giving ear to us, and I hope this conversation will lead us to building thereon.
Excellent. Thank you, Liam. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Tanaka.
Okay, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to you, my sister, Yvonne Mchaka, for hosting us. We know it's going to be difficult for the message to reach the offices which it's supposed to really reach, but the struggle, I can say, they've already said, they've been saying okay, they've been saying the struggle is real, and the struggle, but let me tell you the truth. The struggle is just begun, and we are going to fight very hard for us to see the freedom of our nation. Let me just leave you a word that freedom should not be Zanunized. Freedom should never be Zanunized. Freedom should be a portion of every single Zimbabwe.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Tanaka. Over to you, Odila. Last words to the people as we say bye-bye.
All right. Thank you so much, Yvonne, for hosting us. I'm grateful that we have a fruitful conversation. I wish this conversation to be done in days to come, so that everyone will come to know who we are as students and what do we need, so that we can change the learning environment. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Odila. Thanks to you, lady and gentlemen, for joining me. And thank you, all of you who joined me here live on Zimbabwe Daily as we spoke student and political activism in Zimbabwe. What do you think? What's your view? We would love to hear from you. Keep following us on Facebook. Join us and follow us on Twitter. Also, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zim Daily. We love you and we want to keep these conversations going. Thank you so much for joining me and have yourselves a wonderful rest of day. God bless you.